Hi, my name is Ashley. This is my interview with Cindi Lincoln, the ex-wife of cult leader Kent Hovind. There's about 3 minutes of lag at the beginning of the video, but no big deal. It works itself out. This is part one of my interview with Cindi. Stay tuned for part two. There you go.
Here I am. Hi, hon.
Hi.
How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I was just doing some reading on some articles about
Reading. You sent me on some yucky articles. No, not really yucky, but heavy duty. I did my reading up on Hades and Sheol and whatever that other one was.
Oh gosh, you watched my videos. Those videos.
Yes. Well,
I'm sorry, that was probably a lot to take in, wasn't it? Or is that, or those things that you knew already?
I was a little bit familiar, but I think just the emotional part of it, it's sad to me to see somebody, but I know it. So let's just start the show by saying the opinions expressed are those of the participants. We are not doing this interview because we're in agreement on everything. We're doing it because we care about people and want to be able to express our feelings, and I care about stuff. I'm sorry, I don't have the right word.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that I think that one of the overall most important things is that whether we're a believer or not a believer, that there are people who are leaders out there or who use their platforms for the wrong reasons to do bad things. And those are the types of things that we have to try to speak out about and put a stop to. So
I totally agree.
It really doesn't matter what we believe or don't believe. It's just, I want to hear your story, your experience, because I know you went through some stuff.
Hell, speaking of hell.
Yes, hell on earth.
Hell. I went through hell. Yeah. So we have some similarities. I think the thing that resonated with you was when I said I lost my husband, my family, my fellowship, my ministry, my home, everything.
Yes.
I think that would be what was listening to your story. You said you started from nothing. And yeah, that was very, 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 very devastating. And in a similar way to you, where you felt like you had been duped, I was duped too. Not because I didn't any longer believe that Jesus was real, but because the place I was living was a fraud.
You were scammed.
Oh my gosh. And it took me 5 years to see it. That's how good they were.
You're a good con
artist, a professional. Like he could be in Hollywood. He acts so good.
Wow.
All of them.
Scary.
It is. He surrounds himself with the same kind of people.
And I don't know details about him like some of the other people that are on YouTube that, the details that I know of him are because of videos that I've watched, that Aaron Raw has done and debates that he's been on, where obviously I've heard the other side, but I've never sat down and listened to his videos. And I know a general idea of what he teaches, but the fraudulent side of him, that's kind of newer information to me. So I'm kind of on a little bit of a blank slate when it kind of comes to that.
Okay. Yeah. I don't, well, first of all, I wanted to say one thing that you said in the beginning about people in leadership using it for evil.
Mm-hmm.
The very first interview that I did was with a guy named Atheist Junior, AJ, and his avatar is a cross with a gun going up of it. And that's because he said this is about people who use the cross as a weapon.
Oh, that's good.
I really appreciated that because I was getting slammed by the Christians for, first of all, going to an atheist channel, and second of all, he's got a gun going up the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, and he's evil, and God's going to judge you, and you're not going to be held guiltless, and all this stuff. And so I asked AJ, what does that represent? And he said it represents people using religion as a weapon. And actually, in Kent's case and his cronies, it's not just a weapon, it's a money grab. It's a money grab. So
How much money do you think he's worth? Do you think
he's not one of these
total?
guys. He doesn't wear a Rolex watch. He doesn't drive a Mercedes. He wears normal clothes. He buys his shoes at Walmart. You would never know. His thing is he dumps it into building Dinosaur Adventure Land. And
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
I know. I always thought it was really cornball too. But I was very much influenced by Henry Morris and the Institute for Creation Research in the beginning of my walk with Christ in 1988 and 89. I heard them, and that's basically what Kent teaches: young earth creationism, global flood, the fossil record happening quickly, not over long periods of time. And so
yeah, I've heard him say that before.
I still agree with a lot of that. And that is still the ministry of my heart. And, you were saying how you looked at nature different when you deconverted. Instead of looking at nature and saying, oh, wow, God made that, you now looked at it like, wow, that's been around for millions of years. How did that evolve? And I had the exact flip as you. I had no Bible in my home growing up. I was not raised in the church. I didn't believe in Jesus until my second year of college. And so I went from looking at the Grand Canyon going, wow, millions of years, how did that happen? Or looking at the flowers like you were saying and going, wow, how did they evolve? From that, I did exactly the opposite of you, where now I'm like, oh, that is an amazing gift from the hand of the Lord for people. That,
Interesting.
And you feel the wind hit your sweat. It's like he's there. He's kissing or just letting me know that it's not as bad as I think it is.
That's funny because I used to have those. I used to feel that too. It really is kind of flip-flopped. That's interesting.
There was another thing I heard you say that was a flip-flop too. Well, anyway, there's so much to say. It's hard to it's hard to finish one.
I know, because like you and I have never really even had much of an introduction ourselves. I kind of just got a hold of your information, was like, hey, do you want to do a video and get this out here? And I can just try to have as many of my friends share your information and see if they want to interview you too. Have you been on many interviews?
I've lost count. So yes. I mean,
good.
I'd say between 10 and 20.
That's good.
Still,
That's awesome.
So, sometimes people will say to me, Cindi, you shouldn't talk bad about the Lord's anointed. You've heard that bull crap before.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, so I'm just supposed to leave, shut my mouth, and leave the door wide open for the next victim to come walking up your path. I'm
No.
sorry. No. And, I hate it when people say, oh, she's just bad mouthing, or she's, what do they call it? When you're a jilted wife or whatever. That is not it. It's that he needs to be exposed. I am obligated to warn the public. He is a thief. He's a really good actor. Don't go to Dinosaur Adventure Land unless you want to be spiritually abused, financially abused, psychologically abused. And don't give your money to somebody who does that to people. That is not Christian.
So I guess walk me through like what the experience is going to Dinosaur Adventure Land. Like, is it like you go there for a few hours, or is it an extended stay? Like,
That's a good question. And I also wanted to address your earlier question, or your earlier when you laughed when I said Dinosaur Adventure Land, because it is corny. And I thought that too. But when I was driving, so that's how I got on the Henry Morris thing. It's a ministry of my heart. And I overlooked the corny stuff because I'm a geography major. I love science. I wanted to do this ministry. So when I was driving from California, I passed 2 other dinosaur theme parks. But of course, they're teaching millions of years. And so it helped me understand why this kind of a theme park is necessary. If what I believe is true and evolution is wrongly pulling people from the Bible, from the Savior, and from the Lord, then that's why I wanted to get behind that.
yeah. And I understand that.
So I heard him. So what he says is, come down and help build Dinosaur Adventure Land. We'll house you. Room and board for labor. And so
they have what's the housing like?
it's not the best.
You're going to be like
a dorm situation.
Commune?
You're going to be. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they had, this shows his issues with women, which I didn't pick up at the time, but the women's dorm was called the hen house.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And the man cave is where the men are. And then if you have a family.
They call it the man cave?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then if you have a family with children, you get a cabin. And so basically,
is it kind of like a camp almost, yeah, where there's like bunk beds or just yes, multiple beds.
The man cave and I'm not going to call it the hen house because that's really insulting. The girl cave, whatever you want to call it, had bunk beds, like 6 in a room, which was okay because you're going there to serve. You're not going there to have your own private little mansion or anything. And it was, the hard part was that there were smokers and discrepancy about, air conditioning and not opening the windows. And I have a fresh air thing and I can't tolerate cigarette smoke. And so I
don't blame you.
Headache, stomach ache. So I bought my own cabin. So when I left California, I rented out my home. I have a home that I inherited in California. So that rent check is how I supported myself. And so I could work for free. And basically you go for a short amount of time so that Kent can see if you work hard enough and if he wants you to stay. And if he does, then you stay. or go home, pack everything, and move. And then other people just come for a day, kind of like a museum. There's an outdoor tour where you take side by side around 120 acres, and he teaches lessons from nature. Consider the lilies. And then there's an inside science center tour, which I got to do a lot of, and I'm very proud of that. Which basically teaches kind of what his seminar series teaches, that evidence for the Garden of Eden, a tropical environment in the early earth, the evidence of dinosaurs coexisting with humans, there's a section on if God is good, why is there suffering? Which is a huge question. Yeah.
Inside the museum there is?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It started out as like a 1.5 hour tour, and now basically you need to go 2 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it just got bigger and bigger?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did he build on?
Yep. He's a building addict. That's kind of where, when we were talking about, he doesn't wear a Rolex watch, he just builds. He's always building a new cabin or a new addition to the science center, or laying concrete, or putting a lake house near the lake. He's just
Is the whole property 120 acres?
Mm-hmm. And a lot of it's not developed.
So he has room to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like that's his motive.
Well,
if I were to take a guess.
That's the good, that looked like a good motive. He does not charge admission. But I guess it must either be an ego thing. Actually, I had another idea. Jimmy Baker and who's that other fraudulent guy? Jerry Falwell, and then there's Hyles Anderson College. They all were perpetually building, because then you can have a fundraiser going. If you're not building, then they're not sending money. And I don't really understand how it works. All I know is there's some kind of a cover-up that is so bad that they turn on you like a pack of wolves if you start to ask questions or see something funny going on. And that's what happened to me. I didn't see, well, there's always things wrong. But when does something that's wrong cross the line to where that's a deal breaker?
Yeah.
And so, especially when he was such an inspiration. I mean, you might remember this as a Christian, an evangelist who travels the world preaching the gospel is like held in really high esteem, because we always do something great for the Lord, but we're all too chicken to go into another country.
That's why I was a part of Master's Commission, because that was just, I always wanted to do that.
Do something great for the Lord.
Yeah. I mean, because it was just a part of the Great Commission. That was why it was named that, but to go out and to preach the gospel.
Yeah. And I knew I was too shy or unsuccessful. Like, I had tried doing street evangelism where you hand tracts out or whatever, and it was like, this just feels wrong. And in California,
feels kind of pushy or not personal,
unwanted,
yeah, unsolicited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I never had any good luck in California. And so I gave up. I mean, I still have those tracks in my car from 30 years ago. Out. They just sit there and wrinkle up, start to at the corners. But when I came to Dinosaur Adventure Land, Alabama is a different environment. And we used to make extra copies of his DVD about dinosaurs and how they fit in with the Bible. And there's a lot of interest in that subject. And we would hand them out at the state fair. And instead of people throwing them on the ground or saying, no, that's good for you, but leave me alone, they would take them and they would look at them and they would say, I've always wondered about this. Thank you. And I'm just like, what? Wow. So we did that a couple of times. But primarily, I was just working on the Science Center, greeting guests, landscaping, taking care of volunteers. And it was a great time. It was a great time when things were good.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand that. It was good while it was good.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it can get dirty really fast.
Very dirty. I mean, I've
the
never
wrong leader is in charge.
Ruins the whole damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing was ruined by his narcissistic.
I know that, I mean, I don't really want to go out of order just because I'm kind of like overly excited. I know that when I had listened to your story on the Non Sequitur show, that you were saying that you had listened to his teachings and his YouTube videos, I think, prior to going going there and even being in a relationship with him, right? So you had kind of been following those teachings for quite a while.
Yes. Well, 2016 is the year that I found him on YouTube and the year that I moved there. And my roommate would ask me, why are you listening to that dinosaur guy again? And I'm like, I don't know why I'm obsessed with this guy. But I remember when I was exposed to Henry Morris and the Institute for Creation Research, it was life-changing for me. And so it's always been a message of my heart. It just, between 1988 and 2016, nobody wanted to hear it. But yes, I was familiar with his teaching, and I have been confronted on a couple of errors in the science. And I'm retracting a couple of my positions from the Science Center because some non-young Earth creationists have made a good point or two. But a lot of it I still agree with. The only reason I left is because of the abuse. I left because of the abuse, the deceit, the lying, the slander, the full-on smear campaign. So all of us were, from 2016 until hell started in 2020, we all noticed that there was this one particular man named Steve that got away with anything that all of us would get fired for. And he would he was caught with marijuana. He was caught lying on multiple occasions. He was caught stealing from the ministry. And Kent didn't care, wouldn't fire him. Anybody else, though, he was very hard-nosed, and he would do a drug test. And if you tested positive, you were out, but not if you were Steve. So we were all wondering what's going on. And we all thought, well, Kent's just had the wool pulled over his eyes. But there was one occasion where he was lying and he was hurting new converts that had come to campus to be clean. And he brought them to his house to give them drugs. And they came to be clean. They didn't want to go back to that lifestyle, but he tempted them and stumbled them.
Oh, wow.
like, I'm the camp mom. I care about these people, and I
That's
brought it
not right.
to attention. And I was called a liar. I was told that I had a vendetta against this man, that I was a Jezebel. I mean, I'm just like,
You told Kent about this and he said that to you?
yeah, my husband said that to me. He went from, you're the best, I love you, we're a team, you know, you're set up to, if something happens to me, take over the ministry. And then this thing with Steve happens, and bam, now I'm Jezebel, I'm a liar. That's kind of what
Oh,
happened. There was a turn when you didn't toe the line, they flipped on you. I mean, I
which
don't know.
is weird too, because you'd think that for the sake of his ministry, he wouldn't want something like that going on. People coming there for it
I
to be a
know.
safe haven.
And another divorce doesn't look good for the ministry either.
No.
Wife who's crying all the time doesn't look good for the ministry either. So I said, honey, nobody else will think that I'm lying. Everybody here knows me. They've known me for 3 years, and that I'm not a liar. And he said, okay, let's start a meeting. So he called a meeting, and 7 different witnesses said, Cindy's not lying. She doesn't lie. Steve lies all the time. And we've all seen him doing pot and lying. Well, Kent, instead of defending me and his wife, because 7 witnesses aren't wrong, he says, let me call Ernie, which is his financier, aka cohort in crime. Now I know. And Ernie said that Kent Hovind was Moses, that Ernie, was Aaron, his mouthpiece, and that I was Korah. You know what happened to Korah? The earth opened up and swallowed him down for rebelling against the Lord's anointed. And I just went, what? And then Ernie said to all the 7 witnesses, anybody who keeps talking about this matter, anybody who keeps joining Korah's rebellion will be kicked off campus. And that I could be kicked off campus too, even though I was his wife. And that was the first really big betrayal. And then Kent closed the meeting in prayer. Is the hypocrisy making you throw up yet?
Just about.
Or rage. Like, yeah, rage, nausea. Anyway, I stood up and I cried out at the top of my lungs and ran from that meeting. I ran home crying the whole way, very, very loudly, because I had never, that was just, wow.
It's just unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Because I had been there working my rear end off, loving my husband with all my heart, giving all my resources, taking care of people with love, and now I'm treated like this. And so Ernie Land said that the reason I was crying and screaming is because I was a bipolar idiot. And so that's when the smear campaign started. They knew that I knew there was a cover-up, so they had to smear me and isolate me from everyone else there so that I wouldn't tell them the truth. And if I'm a bipolar mental case, then that discredits my witness. And that didn't stop. At first, I'm like, this is just a misunderstanding.
Which is incorrect anyway, because even if you're bipolar, that doesn't make you stupid. Like, they don't go hand in hand.
At one point, a police officer was involved on multiple occasions, but at one time he said to me, oh my gosh, yes. So at one point he tried to have me locked up. I don't know what state you're in, but there's something called
Ohio.
in Florida, 5150 in California. Basically, it's where they take you against your will and put you in a psych ward and give you meds. And the police officer said the same thing as you're saying, that bipolar is not, you give them meds and you love them. It's not like these people who go around saying, I'm Jesus Christ and I'm going to shoot you, or, you know, whatever. I mean, the police officer told me all these stories about real loony bins. And he said, bipolar is not a candidate for a 5150. Like exactly like what you were saying. But anyway, I thought at first that it was just, I actually called Ernie the next day and I said, Ernie, you misunderstood. I wasn't crying because I'm mentally ill. I was crying because of the betrayal. And he acted all nicey, like, oh, I understand. Oh, wow. We just needed to have a good talk. But then for the next year, they kept doing it, and part of it behind my back. I didn't know my husband kept telling people that behind my back. My wife is insane. My wife is crazy. Oh, Cindi had another episode last night. Seems to go in cycles. She's very, very good wife sometimes, and then it seems to be every couple of weeks, and she goes off. I'm like, I'm gonna kill.
You're going to drive me to the point of insanity.
Well, and that's,
I mean, like, plus, like, being in that environment anyway, like, how could that not?
Thank you. Yeah, there's a name for that. One of my commenters said something like that it's almost part of their scheme to make you act. Did you see the movie Gaslight? 1943, Gaslight. The guy was actually intentionally trying to get his wife to throw her upsetness in a public theater. He took her to a show, and then he did something like he had been accusing her of stealing things, and he pulled out something that he had accused her of and said, see, here it is. You did steal it. And she was having a mental breakdown from his abuse, his psychological abuse. And he would just say things like, well, the Gaslight title came from the fact that there was a gas light in their bedroom, and he would go on the other side of the wall and wiggle it. And she would say, honey, there's somebody in there. The light's moving. And he would say, oh, honey, you're having another episode. Come to bed, honey. Here, let me give you some medicine. You're seeing things again. It's an intentional trying to make you lose your mind.
Yeah.
And they can go and say, see, look, she's crazy. Don't listen to her.
Intentionally provoking you.
Yes.
Making it seem like you're making things up. And
to your witness, because everybody there loved me, and he had to cut that off. Because otherwise, how could he divorce me if everybody loved me? He had to villainize me. Very, very obvious. And he had these cohorts, Ernie and Steve, that were in on it with him. They vandalized my house. They stole my money by breaching a contract that we had for 20 years of payments. When I had been in Alabama for 3 years, I decided to sell my California house because taxes in California are like thousands of dollars. And
yeah,
taxes in California, and taxes in Alabama are dirt cheap. So I said, I'll just get Alabama properties and replace my income with local properties. And so I started to do that, and I bought my first house. And I realized as I was looking for my next house, I said, honey, I don't really need another house. I just need another income check to equal the same amount that I was getting from my California home. And I said, what if I put the same amount of purchase price into Dinosaur Adventure Land and we can build it together. This is before it got bad, by the way, a year before hell started.
So this was before that fight.
Exactly.
Well, that betrayal. About a year before that.
About a year before that. And he said, let me talk to Ernie. So the financier wrote up a contract for 20 years of payments if I were to put this amount of money into Dinosaur Adventure Land. But he wrote it up with loopholes that I didn't know at the time. He called it spousal support and donations instead of investment and return. He said, as a ministry, we're not allowed to do that. So we're just going to call it spousal support and donations. And I'm like, okay, I don't know anything about your ministry regulations, whatever, as long as I get my check. Well, guess what? Once I'm no longer a spouse, so I gave, basically the contract was for over half of my livelihood, over half of my monthly income. And when they stopped payment, I started asking for it. It's kind of, I'm going to shorten the story. So I'm leaving out some details, which hopefully nobody will say I'm lying. I'm not lying, I'm just shortening. But essentially, when they wouldn't continue the payments and solidify the contract, I guess I can't leave that. Anyway, they started saying, why do you want your donations back? That would only be an Indian giver. That would be a greedy bitch. That would be a deceitful plan that you originally, or that you intentionally tried to rip off the ministry.
Make it seem like it was meant to be donations the whole time.
Or, I mean, they've changed their story about 10 times. That's one of their stories, that it was always a donation. The other story is, well, it was spousal support. And so therefore, you know, since you're a bipolar idiot and you're not sleeping with your husband because you don't like him calling you a bipolar idiot, well, then you don't get your check. So 18 years of payments they breached. That's why I started the show by saying he's a thief. He's a liar. He doesn't.
18 years worth of payments?
When you buy a rental property, it's basically a paycheck for life. And then at the end of your life, your child gets to inherit that property. But I made a concession. Instead of a lifetime contract, I said, he said, I can't do that. I can only do 20 years. And I said, okay, that's fine. I'll do 20 years. Maybe I'll be dead. So yeah, they paid for 2 years and then breached the contract and stole half my livelihood. So I went from being able to help people and self-support, be generous, to now I'm $20,000 in debt. I had to sell my car. So ultimately, the abuse got so bad that I moved out.
How did he isolate you? Like, what specifically did he do? Where he isolated you by basically telling people to not associate with you?
Yes. And that if they did, they would be kicked off campus. And remember, we sold everything to go there. Most people don't have another home to go to. The only reason I had this home to go to is because I had bought it as a rental property for my income.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? When you move into it, you don't get the rent check anymore. But anyway, the Lord worked it all out. First, my mom was here for a little while and she paid me some rent. And then I had bought a home for another family that had the same thing happen to them. They discovered that Steve was stealing from the ministry and lying to Kent and Ernie. And so they had the same thing happen. They were slandered. They were run off. And so I felt really bad for them, and I still had some cash left over. So I bought them a home, and they are paying me every month. So that was, now, thank God I did that, because
Who
that
is that? That
the income. Their names are Nick and Julie. Nick had discovered Steve and Ernie's misconduct.
okay.
And so he ultimately went, he was being slandered just like me, only instead of being called a Jezebel, he was being called other things that you would call a man. And he left campus just like me. And so I helped them get their own home. And that turned out to be now my income. And then there was another piece of property that I bought because Kent wanted it, because it's right next door to Dinosaur Adventure Land. And that was another provision that turned into, okay, now that has to be my income. So the Lord did provide. But it's very ugly what's going on over there. So you heard about two of us, Nick and myself, that had that happen to them.
Yeah.
But there's at least two other former volunteers that have Kent Hovind exposed websites. One of them did a document, his name is Theo, did a documentary called Kent Hovind, Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. And the other guy, Christopher Johnson, did a documentary called Kent Hovind, Wolf in Costume. Very, very similar names. So I'm not the only one saying this.
Wow.
This out there. And on my channel is interviews with probably 10 or 15 former volunteers that started seeing that Kent is abusive.
Wow. And can you imagine how many more too? Because I know that, I'm 8.5 years out, and it took me about 7 years to finally start talking about some of it, because I was just kind of in survival mode for a while. It's like, can
That
you
was
imagine
very
some of the
disturbing.
people that don't want to come out publicly or haven't put in
Yes.
that work, and they're just kind of suffering on their own. So you guys are speaking out, but there's got to be more people out there that haven't even spoke out.
I've talked to them. They refuse to go on the channel. I don't understand that. Don't you understand that if you don't say anything, you're contributing to the next victim?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of
did other people like sold all of their things to go there, like you?
And then dump all of their savings into Dinosaur Adventure Land because they think they're serving God, or they think they're building a cabin that they'll be able to stay there because they've already demonstrated they're a faithful worker. They work hard. They put in their time. So Kent, yeah, go ahead, stay here.
Oh my gosh, it's so dangerous. It's like you're treating him almost like he's like the government, but he has a hold all of your money, and he's just kind of rationing things out to you, but then he never actually does.
Yeah, there was some complaints about the food, like we get the cheapest food possible. But if you build a cabin at Dinosaur Adventure Land, it's on his property. And so
He would own it?
you get kicked off. You can't really take it with you. I actually tried to haul my cabin away. And I ended up having, thank God, somebody buy it, give me cash for it so that I could at least not lose all of my investment. They donated it to the ministry. I do. My YouTube has gotten so big, it's kind of hard to find things. But if you click on the playlists, I've tried to organize it.
Mm-hmm.
Playlist called Kent Hovind Exposed. And so he started recording me, looking for being able to prove that I was a bipolar idiot. You know, he would get me angry and then record me. And so my girlfriend said, well, Cindi, why don't you record him? And at first I'm like, anyway, so bottom line is there's some recordings of him out of his own mouth. One of the playlists is called Kent Hovind Exposed by His Own Mouth. And when I started listening to the recordings that I was getting of him behind my back, the same wail would happen because I was seeing what he was doing behind my back and this different man that I didn't know about.
What kind of things would he do behind your back?
Well, remember I told you that they vandalized my rental property?
Yeah.
Well, the man who lived here was the Steve guy who was giving people pot.
Yeah.
So Kent would say, I didn't vandalize it, Steve did. Well, actually, he said Steve didn't vandalize it. Nick, who did the construction on it, just left it in terrible situation. I'm like, so I overheard him talking to Steve about the vandalism, proving that he is a cohort on it. He said, yeah, go ahead and steal the washer and dryer. Or he didn't say steal. He said, go ahead and take the washer and dryer. She's a bitch. And I'm like, this is my husband. And not only is it a big change, but it's covert.
Did he normally talk like that? Like, I mean, like cuss, things like that? So you caught him on video. I was going to say
how he talked to me was, I love you, honey. I'll never leave you. I'll never divorce you. Come to bed, honey. Let me rub your feet. Let me rub your back.
Wow, how different. It's like
gaslighting.
Did you?
And actually, after I left, I kept coming home every weekend. I thought, okay, just forget all that. Just try and make your marriage work. Because I was still in love with the fake.
Yeah.
That it was all a lie yet. It's like reality would come and go. When I would hear the recording, I'd go, oh my gosh, he's a fake. He hates me. And then I would go home and he would be normal. And there were some, this is part of the Christian community. Just forget everything, Cindi, and go back to your husband. So anyway, and Kent would say that. He would say, I don't want to argue with you. And what that means is I'm not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
It is. And either you love it or you leave it. And so I didn't want to leave it. So I tried his little game. Okay, we won't talk about it. We'll just go to bed and act like nothing's wrong. But then, and I remember one night, you were saying about how could he fake that?
Yeah.
I remember one night I had been gone for like a week and a half, and I came back for the first time, and he held me so tight, and he stroked my forehead, and I could feel that he was so glad I was back. And I still to this day remember that moment, and the thing I've thought is that he actually has two personalities, and the one personality doesn't know about it. I'm just guessing, honey. He's greedy, and I think he's in some kind of he's in bed with Steve and Ernie somehow. And it's so tight that even a wife is secondary to that.
Yeah. That's like a weird boys club thing.
It's the only thing I can imagine is it's a money grab or a cover up for Steve's drugs. Maybe Steve's selling drugs and giving money to the ministry.
Was he involved with things other than marijuana? Like,
yes.
Harder than that?
He got arrested August of last year, 2021. And when he got arrested, Kent Hovind sent 13 of the Dinosaur Adventure Land volunteers to his house to clear it out so that the police couldn't see any evidence. I have that on recording too. Well, they found heroin.
I need to go to your YouTube and check these out.
They found heroin. They found
Heroin? Oh my gosh.
They found methamphetamines. Kent's secretary flushed them down the toilet. According to the other volunteers who were there that day, I wasn't there. They found,
oh my gosh,
on the ministry computers, there were 2 monitors. One had S&M bondage porn, sadomasochistic bondage porn, where the girl was tied up. And the other ministry computer had gay porn. And they found whips and chains and cables for tying people up in his house. Kent wasn't fazed in the least. This is the way he overlooks everybody else's sin except for mine. Actually, I think it's overlooks Steve's sin primarily and nobody else's. I don't know. But that made it
what
really...
about Ernie? Wow, what is he like towards that guy?
They're in bed together. Steve does the tech stuff. He does the website and the PayPal. He handles the money. He was actually caught, and he had confessed to embezzling tens of thousands of dollars from the ministry. But so Ernie...
So if that's the case, I mean, imagine what he does for him.
Yeah. How much is Ernie skimming? I know.
I mean, they've got to have some sort of big fraud thing going on. I mean, like similar to like the show Ozark. Have you seen that? I mean, it's like money laundering and drugs, and they kind of run it through a business. And
yes, to make it look legit.
And I mean, obviously we don't know that, so I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, it seems like something kind of serious and pretty, maybe possibly illegal could be run through there. And
that's what everybody says. Either that or Steve's got blackmail. But Ernie's involved too. And I know that Ernie allows Steve to do... So Ernie's involved in multi-level marketing. Just found out last month that he actually was almost arrested for probably pyramid scheme, something about his multi-level marketing, and his license was revoked in Texas or something, or he almost got thrown in jail. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but very serious accusations against Ernie, and he's still doing multi-level marketing. And when you get a new downline, they need a website, right? I don't know if you've ever done MLM. And
no,
Steve builds websites for Ernie. So we know that they are business partners in the very least. But I mean, Ernie will lie for Steve as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that just tells me there's a cover-up. I don't know what it is, but something
it's
evil.
Really sketchy. And basically the bottom line is people should think twice before giving even $1.
Yes, that's basically my...
Please don't ministry or whatever the heck it is.
Do not give an abuser money. I don't care how many countries he's been to, how many souls he's led to the Lord. If he's a criminal, if he's an abuser, we are supposed to judge him by their fruits, right? We're not supposed to say, oh, well, he's a great evangelist, so it's okay if he does that. And Cindy's just overreacting, or Cindy's, who cares what Cindy thinks? Cindy shouldn't be saying anything bad about the Lord's anointed, this great man of God I admired him too. I always wanted to be a missionary, but that kind of behavior, you can't get a pass for that.
You can't. And that's kind of one of my problems that can come along with church, is that sometimes leaders or pastors or people in general, and I'm saying this like as a former leader myself, but people in general will try to convince the woman to stay with an abusive partner because they're a man of God. And
When
so
they're
often
not.
that's a horrible, horrible piece of advice. The piece of advice is get out of there and let me help you.